Well, the first base market is finally moving, but the Tigers have yet another quiet weekend. We'll talk about that and more all today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Monday, December 23rd, 2024. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off of your first purchase. Welcome in, everybody. Happy Monday. Hope you all had a fantastic weekend. We got a few things to talk about today. None of them groundbreaking, as you are all well aware. No one's coming into this show thinking, oh man, I can't wait to hear what we're going to, talk about in regards to a huge deal that was made, a huge signing, a huge trade, whatever. But some stuff happening in the American League Central by teams not named the Detroit Tigers that does impact teams named the Detroit Tigers. And then we have more rumors and more reports. So we are going to discuss all of that and more. A lot of toward the end of the show, we'll talk about the first base market that is moving finally after it was not for really the entire offseason up until this weekend. The Tigers, again, stay quiet. They did make a few moves, but they are all minor league signings and they are all minor league pitching depth. They signed Matt Gage, left-handed pitcher, to a minor league deal. Dietrich Enns, left-handed pitcher, to I think that's presumably a minor league deal, but I don't think that's officially been reported by the team yet. That was reported actually by Enns himself. And then Jordan Balazovic, who was a former top 100 prospect in baseball at one point, but has not been in a while and pitched over in the KBO this past season. Dietrich Enns has also pitched overseas as well. So you're talking about two lefties, one righty, minor league contracts, some invites to spring training thrown in there. I know for at least two of the three. Again, we'll see what happens when the details of Enns' contract come out. We'll start with Enns a little bit. He is, again, left-handed pitcher. He is 33 years old and has not pitched in the majors since 2021. Now, he didn't have a bad year in 2021. Actually graduated from Central Michigan University, Dietrich Enns, so home state. I don't know about hometown, but home state kid at a minimum. Former 19th round pick in the 2012 draft. In the 2021 season, he had a sub-3 ERA, but it was just in 9 appearances. And obviously that was not enough for him to land a major league roster spot since, and still has not been. Again, minor league deal. Some decent stuff here. Mid-90s fastball, has a good cutter as well. That's mostly his last time he threw in the majors. What he threw, that's the big difficulty with analyzing some of these guys that have been pitching, overseas or pitching in Asia for the last several years, is like his repertoire may have changed. I don't know. I watched the KBO religiously during COVID when we were all at home and Major League Baseball wasn't being played. I was staying up till 1 and 4 in the morning to watch the Doosan Bears and the Twins and whatnot. But I I can't say that I'm doing that grind anymore. So I haven't seen him pitch in probably 3 years either. He had a changeup and a curveball that he threw very rarely prior to or his most recent stint in the majors as well. But again, you're talking about a mid-90s fastball from the left side and a cutter the last time he was here. And this organization has shown time and time again that they, A, really like cutters and want to have their pitchers develop cutters if possible. And B, if you have a cutter, they have utilized it. The only person that really hasn't been able to successfully, with a cutter flourish in the Tiger system is Joey Wentz. And even that wasn't really because of the cutter. It was because of the four-seam fastball that was really, really unproductive at the major league level. So we'll see what happens with him. Again, we also signed Matt Gage, left-handed pitcher, to a minor league deal. Another pitcher that has a mid-90s fastball from the left side, something you like to see. Pitched just 5 games, 6 2/3 innings in 2023. Did have a pretty good ERA in that short stint in the majors, for whatever that is worth to you. Very much like over the top pitcher, which is kind of unique. Doesn't really go from the 3/4 arm slot. Really tries to go as over the top as possible, which I think is kind of unique. But he's mostly a fastball guy. Also, you're not going to believe this, throws a cutter, has a slider, as most lefties in the bullpen do. And I think those three things together, I have some faith that the Tigers would be able to get some productive innings out of him. And then lastly, again, we have Jordan Balazovic. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. Again, former top 100 prospect, is a guy that also has a mid-90s fastball. This one from the right side, has a curveball, a slider, and a changeup to go with that as well. In 2023, in 24 innings in the majors, had an ERA over 4 and a whip over 1.5. Not great, not very good peripherals. He is 26 years old, and in the KBO last year had an ERA over 4. Had some pretty good strikeout numbers over there, and had some pretty good strikeout numbers in the minor leagues for the Minnesota Twins as well. But has always had a relatively high ERA, and that is why he is obviously signed to a minor league contract here, and he's not guaranteed a roster spot by any stretch of the imagination. So those are your 3 newest additions. There you go. I hope we weren't going into this episode hoping for a big reveal of, signing a big name free agent or making a big trade. We're talking about, on a beautiful Monday morning, 3 minor league pitchers that may or may not be in the organization coming out of spring training. But those are the profiles. Velocity, good. Cutters for 2 of them. Formerly highly regarded pitcher as well. So we'll see what happens. I'm really not worried about pitching. And I have no problem with these in a vacuum. And I read my own comments, man. I understand what I'm going to read probably when I wake up on Monday morning and people talking about this episode and what I talked about and whatnot. And there's probably a handful of people that are going to be upset that we're talking about 3 minor league signings. But that's what we have. And I've said this a lot this offseason. Pretty much every time we sign a minor league player is I have no issue with these in a vacuum. Every team signs a ton of minor league players every year. You need organizational depth. You need to be able to fill a roster. That is a good thing. And I'm glad that this front office is proactive enough to address said depth, especially in the pitching department. I'm sure they have coaches that have input on, who they're looking at and who they're targeting and whatnot and who they think they can get the most out of. But the frustration doesn't lie with this in a vacuum. It lies with the big picture, where these minor league signings are all this team has done so far this offseason. And I completely understand the frustration in regards to that. And I'm right there with you. Okay. Tigers were ranked as the best farm system in baseball by USA Today over the weekend. We're going to talk about that a little bit. Then we'll talk about some rumors, the fact that they're still pretty quiet. And then we'll talk about some around the league news that affects your Detroit Tigers. We will do all of that right after this. Got to talk to y'all today about our friends over at FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It is absolutely thrilling. I had a couple hit in the college football playoff over the weekend, which was very unentertaining from a just normal viewer perspective, but because of FanDuel, made it a little bit more exciting for me, a little bit more of a productive weekend. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, but they also have bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, everybody, segment 2 here, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. As always, making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back. I believe we are still going to be back on Wednesday, which I know is going to give you a Christmas Day episode. Hopefully, we can make it a little bit of fun, maybe talk about something. I know the Tigers Zips projections for individual players over at Fangraphs just came out. We always do a whole episode and kind of talk about those projections and what the formula is seeing. It's not great, I'll be honest with you, but Zips has been wrong plenty before and certainly didn't predict the Tigers to make the postseason last year. So we'll discuss all of that. I don't know if that'll be Wednesday's show or Friday's show, but we will have that to talk about at some point. But as it stands right now, we will be back on Christmas Day. I appreciate you all for tuning in, genuinely. I know that this is the fact that this show's numbers haven't wavered despite the astounding lack of news, moves, period, it means the absolute world to me. So many other shows, and this show in the past has, the Tigers are losing a lot if it's in the regular season, or if it's the complete, dead point in the offseason and the Tigers haven't done anything all winter. Numbers fall off, understandably so. I get it. I'm not mad at anybody for, not wanting to hear more about doing nothing. But this show's numbers genuinely have not wavered all offseason. That I really does just mean the absolute world to me. So thank you all kindly. Thank you very much. Even if you don't like me and you're just tuning in to, I don't know, get upset or whatever, I really do genuinely appreciate it. The Tigers were ranked as the number 1 farm system in baseball coming out of the winter meetings, according to USA Today. Some other teams in there, the White Sox come in at number 2, the Cubs at number 3, the Red Sox at number 4, the Mariners at 5, and fellow division foe, the Cleveland Guardians, come in at 6. They have Jackson Jobe, Max Clark, Kevin McGonigal, Bryce Rayner, and Jace Young as the 5 best prospects in the Tigers organization. And yeah, right, it wasn't a super long, in-depth article. It was kind of just a paragraph or two on every team and why they put them where they did. But gave Scott Harris credit for the Jack Flaherty trade, which is looking better and better. Obviously, we won't ever truly know until Lorenzo is in the majors, but Trey Sweeney was a valuable asset in the second half of the season and presumably will be on the Major League roster this upcoming season. And Lorenzo has been sensational so far in the minor leagues. But yeah, just said that, they have the number 1 pitching prospect in baseball, have a flurry of bats that hopefully are coming in the next several years. And even at one point wrote that the Tigers could have the best rotation in baseball when Jobe is established. And obviously part of that is going to just be Tarek Skubal's health and availability, right? Whether they extend him and whatnot. But I see the vision there. Reese Olson is young under team control and has been phenomenal for the Tigers. Obviously Skubal, obviously then Joe, but they have a lot of pitching depth too. I mean, how quickly we forget about guys like Sawyer Gibson-Long, who were phenomenal and then missed all of last season and will be back this year, right? Casey Mize, I know a lot of people are disappointed in his career so far, is still a former number 1 overall pick with a good pitching development program in place for the Tigers. Hopefully he can bounce back and be something. But even if he's not, you're talking about an organization that still has the appropriate assets and the appropriate tools and coaches in place to have a really, really good pitching staff for a long time. And that's super encouraging, and hopefully that can stand. And obviously, I think that goes without saying that that's a big part of why the Tigers are ranked so highly. Because for a long time, it was, okay, they have some pitching, but where are any of the bats coming from? And then it was, okay, well, they have Riley Green and Spencer Torkelson, but like, what after that? And now Torkelson's been really shaky. Riley Green has looked like a really good player. But then you have like Kerry Carpenter coming out of the woodwork and being really good. Some people still have really high expectations for Jace Young. We'll see what he can do this upcoming season. I mentioned a guy like Trey Sweeney, former first-round pick that's still very young and in his major league career. Colt Keith, I'm expecting a huge step forward from Colt Keith this upcoming season. Parker Meadows was phenomenal in the second half. So, and I know not all those guys are, none of those guys that I just mentioned are prospects, but If more of those hit, then you're talking about more opportunity cost for the prospects that you do have, and the more impactful that they can be. And so I'm excited, and I'm not sure I would rank them as the number one farm system in baseball, but I certainly think that they are towards the top, and I think that all things considered, we should be pretty optimistic about where the farm system stands right now. Now, the flip side of that coin, for as much as I think that this is a good farm system, I've really liked our drafts in the Scott Harris era. I think that in a year or two time, the farm system will be even better because those guys, like the really cream of the crop outside of Job, are kind of in high single A or lower even. So as those guys get up, then you'll have more drafts to fill up the bottom part of those leagues and whatnot. And you kind of have a full steam ahead, a full machine, for lack of a better term, kind of working there. The flip side of that is as we mentioned in segment one, the frustration from the very quiet offseason. MLB.com put out an article where they stated every single team's offseason moves. And you can just go through, and it has every it's separated by division, and then there's literally team by team, and it has all the free agents that played for that team last season in 2024 and are going to be available, or are available right now rather, this winter. Then they have the free agents that or the trades, the acquisitions they have made, the players they brought in externally, and then the players that they have subtracted internally. The Tigers have two names on their whole list and no other write-up because they haven't done anything. Free agents. In this article, it says Brendan White. A day after this article came out, the Tigers re-signed Brendan White to a minor league contract. So they don't even have him. They have no free agents that were on the team last year and now are like notable, legitimate, major league caliber free agents. Their only acquisition of major league caliber as Alex Cobb, who they signed to 15 to 17 mil. And as we talked about yesterday, who at one point was contemplating retirement. And notable subtractions, they have none. And I think that I know we all get hung up on the additions because that is obviously how your team can improve quickly is getting external additions. But I think that not having subtractions is something I haven't talked about much, and really nobody is really talking about as I don't know if I want to say legitimate issue, but as something that is just fascinating to me. Like, just to have a conversation about it. The last 2 years, the Tigers, at a minimum, although they've been quiet in the offseason in terms of bringing in talent, they have been very loud about addition by subtraction. 2 years ago, the Tigers got the worst production from third base I've ever seen. It was, and in large part that was due to Nick Maton just not being a major league hitter and struggling a lot. But whoever they put at third base in 2023 was just brutal. And they had significant negative WAR. They didn't add a third baseman last year, and we were all upset, but they got rid of all of the different third basemen that were worth negative WAR in 2023. And so this year, while they weren't like an elite team at third base by any stretch of the imagination, they weren't the worst in baseball, and they got better at it just because they let go of the negative assets. We don't even have that this year. They've done next to nothing at the major league level. And there's still a group of fans out there that are like, hey, let's see what happens the rest of the offseason. I agree with that. There is still a lot of talent out there in the free agent market. And if we roll into the season with a couple of bigger name free agents, then it's going to be looked at as a big overreaction that people were as upset as they were. And I completely agree with and understand that. Okay, we got to see how the rest of this plays out. Absolutely. But the subtractions would have already happened. The major league subtractions, if there was, any notable legitimate ones, would have already occurred. And certainly they got rid of some players on the 40-man roster, but they held on to still most of them. They're still in the organization, just not on the 40, almost all of them. It is the same team plus Alex Cobb. And I think that is like there's no change, period. It's one thing not to add, it's another thing to think that you don't need to subtract. Those are two very different things. And yeah, that's kind of where I stand. We'll see how the rest of the offseason plays out. We'll see where, what they do end up adding. I have a hard time believing they're genuinely not going to add a single other name the rest of the offseason. I find that almost impossible to believe. So, like, we'll see what happens the rest of the way. We'll see who they do add. But the fact that the bottom of the roster, the players that were pretty unproductive, we're just holding on to everybody. That's kind of the I don't know about baffling, but that's kind of the head scratcher to me. Almost more so, probably not more so, but I think it's a conversation that has to be had as well. And then you look around the rest of the AL Central. I mean, the Twins haven't really acquired anyone, but still have some free agents out there and have certainly subtracted a couple of players. The White Sox have added 4 players to their major league roster. Now, that's a low bar to be a major leaguer for the White Sox in comparison to other teams, but they've still done it. The Guardians obviously just made a trade. We'll talk about that a little bit in segment 3. And the Royals, I mean, they started off the offseason by getting Jonathan India, making a couple of trades there as well. So nobody in the AL Central's made, huge splashes. The Naylor move might be the biggest one, unless one is slipping my mind here. But I think even in comparison to the other teams in the AL Central, that's been very quiet. The Tigers have done nothing. It is really weird optically to look at this article and see every team have 5 to 10 names on it, and the Tigers have 1 in every category. Well, 0, 0, and 1 in the 3 categories. Fascinating stuff. Okay, let's talk about the first base market and some rumors surrounding the Tigers, as that's all we have. So we'll talk about that right after this. Got to talk to y'all today about our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is focused on togetherness this holiday season, which means bringing people together at live events. And this experience is that much better with Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. They have so many great features on there. All-in pricing is my favorite. You toggle the feature and get your entire total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Picture of your seat before you buy, the lowest price guarantee, and of course, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in as always. So there was a couple of reports over the weekend. The Cardinals are the talk of a lot of conversation lately. Obviously, Arenado, those trade sweepstakes, but Paul Goldschmidt to the Yankees. We'll talk about first base here in a second as well. But it sounds like Eric Fetty and Steven Matz are both guys that the Cardinals would be interested in trading. And there was a report over the weekend that the Tigers have expressed some interest in one or both of them. I mean, fine. Look, I don't want to be a broken record. I understand that one of my faults in my job here is repeating myself or talking about one topic far too often. I fully understand that. And I'm trying really hard to not just repeat the same thing over and over again here. If they were to do this and the price was cheap, I would not care in a vacuum. It just cannot be your biggest move of the offseason. And it's also kind of conflicting because we heard earlier in the offseason that outside of Sasaki, after Alex Cobb, they're kind of done addressing starting pitching. And this would require, trade pieces. So we'll see what happens. I have no issue with this on as a premise, and like these guys aren't top of the rotation arms, but Fetty certainly had a nice bounce back in his career. Steven Matz has been solid at points throughout his career as well. I'm sure that the Tigers pitching coaching staff would do good things with them, and they would be solid bottom rotation arms if the Tigers really needed it. But my focus is much more on what impactful offensive weapons you are actually going to bring in, because right now it looks like zero. That is far more at the forefront of my brain than more depth pitching that's not going to cost too much. I have no issue with it. I understand you need depth pitching, but I can I say I don't care? Like if it happens, we'll talk about it and we'll discuss what the rotation looks like. But I'm focused on what's happening offensively and in the bullpen, for that matter, far more than the rotation at this point. Some moves around the league: Christian Walker to the Astros, Paul Goldschmidt to the Yankees, and Josh Naylor to the Diamondbacks, Carlos Santana to the Cleveland Guardians. So we had, 4 days ago, we were talking about how no first baseman had signed and there was zero movement in the first base front. Now, all outside of Pete Alonso, like all of the best first basemen in baseball are starting to that are available are starting to get moved and signed. So Goldie to the Yankees, I think that's fine for them. I'm hoping that Goldie can kind of have a bounce back in his career. Christian Walker to the Astros. Tigers obviously not willing to go as high as the Astros did there. I think it's very interesting that they go out and get Christian Walker and Nolan Arenado rejects a trade to the Astros. So that's interesting. I wonder if that maybe changes things a little bit. Naylor, I actually love watching Josh Naylor play. I'm not going to lie to you. I really do. He is an absolute electric factory. He's a madman. He looks like a psycho while he's out there and when he hits home runs. But I have absolutely hated going up against him when he is with Cleveland. And so I am just glad that we now play him as little as possible. We only play him, what is that, one to two series a year? Fine by me. Far fewer than the every other week having to face him in a lineup. Not I feel like the Tigers actually did a decent job against him this year. Maybe that's a lie. Someone's gonna look it up and be like, he had a 3,000 OPS against us. But I just every time he came up, J Ram obviously is the big one, but like every time he came up, I would get a pit in my stomach and my palms sweaty, knees weak, arms heavy. I get a little nervous. So wishing him the best. I'm glad I can root for him a little more freely and openly without being judged by people now that he is in the National League. And then Carlos Santana has been around the AL Central. He's really been around everywhere at this point in his career. Obviously a long time member of the Cleveland organization, and then, Minnesota, whatever. So we're very used to him here. And yeah, I think he still walks a lot and it's still a really tough at bat, even if the power has fallen off a cliff in his older age. So I'm sure that he will be fine. I'm sure for Cleveland, a fine replacement level, maybe even slightly over replacement level player. He actually had a pretty good year last year. So something to keep an eye out there for sure. And now it's looking more and more like the Tigers are going to stick with Torkelson at first base. I mean, first basemen are flying off the board. None of them are coming here. So we'll see. There's still, as I said earlier, there's still plenty of first basemen and still plenty of talent, period, out there. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Luzardo to Philly, I think is really interesting. I would have thought the price tag would have been a little higher, but I guess I've seen a lot of reports that people are pretty nervous about his arm health and his physical. So I guess that's probably why the price tag was what it was. But smart for Miami, they should trade everybody, and good for Philly. They're Dave Dombrowski led team. They're all in on the World Series every year. Okay, we're gonna end the show on a little bit more of a somber note. John Keating of now FanDuel Sports Network, but longtime TV personality here for the Tigers and Red Wings, has announced that after the Red Wings season, he will be retiring. So no John Keating for the Tigers pregame and postgame shows for the first time in, I believe, my lifetime. He has just been such a fixture. My mom called me over the weekend after she heard and was like, "Oh my goodness, Keats is retiring." That's been a large majority of a lot of people's lives, and he is just the best. He's a great dude. is fantastic at his job and is loved and respected by so many people in this city professionally and just, from a viewership fan perspective. And it's going to be really sad to see him go, but he says he wants to enjoy the beautiful sunsets that Michigan have to offer with his family and loved ones, and he has absolutely earned and deserves the right to do that. So, wishing all the best to Keats. My friends and I always, my whole life, have tried to come up with the puns and jokes that he makes at start of segments. We've tried, and the transitions he makes. My friends and I have been talking about that since, I've been a little kid. So definitely an end of an era, definitely a local legend here hanging him up, but no one deserves to be celebrated more. So thank you, John Keating, for everything you have done for the city of Detroit and the sports landscape here, and wishing you many, many, many more sunsets. And the big news over the weekend as well, Rickey Henderson passes away at just 65 years old. Heartbreaking. Heartbreaking, man. Yeah, this one sucks. And Rickey was obviously never a Tiger, but it doesn't really matter with someone of that magnitude. Um, a lot of people say there will never be another when someone retires or leaves a job or passes away, and I'm not sure that has ever been more true than when talking about Rickey Henderson for so many reasons. He is, I know everybody talks about the stolen bases specifically and talks about the big, huge personality that he was, but he is legitimately one of the greatest players to ever step on the field. And I don't just mean, because he stole bases and the leadoff home run thing. I mean, legitimately, he is one of the greatest all around at everything baseball players to ever lace him up. And he meant so much to our community in really the sports world, but the Bay Area obviously was a big impact, but all the baseball community just meant the absolute world to a lot of people. And seeing all the stories come out is so beautiful, and it's really sad that it has to happen because of this. That there will never be another Rickey Henderson. So to the man of steel, rest in peace. And I hope that we can all pay him his respect and appreciate him the way that he absolutely deserves. Go watch some Rickey Henderson interviews. I'm glad that he got to be there for the last day in the last game at the Oakland Coliseum on Rickey Henderson Field. Rest in peace, Rickey. As you said yourself, you are the greatest of all time. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, I think, be back on Wednesday. We'll see what happens with the week. It is Christmas Day, but we're going to try, okay? Rest in peace, Rickey, man. It's just so bigger than life that this is one of those that really does impact the entire sport. Like he had no affiliation to the Detroit Tigers organization at any point in his career, and yet this is, it's heavy. Really does impact and touch us all when a figure of that magnitude passes. So rest in peace to Mr. Henderson, and we'll be back on Wednesday. Peace and love going to therapy's dope. I'll catch you all then, baby. Go Tigers.